that their choices may be those of flawless perfection does not mean that they do not have this power to choosing. Hence, their choices are moral choices. If you couldn't choose evil, you couldn't be a moral being, could you? Because you have no alternative.
Before we go ahead, and I realize that the first one of these I've ever sat in on, one question that I asked Bill on the way down here. This is by revelation. How and by whom?
Well, that's a good question. And I can't answer it because I know long as I'll never do that.
But you know.
No, I know more, but I don't know all. There's still some things I don't understand, though. I know many things that I promise not to discuss. But there's some things that I've got gaps in my... I have to theorize it first. And try to bridge.
Then on that, you can't give me any help.
No, I can't, except that you can tell. I don't know the chemical formula for orange juice, but I like the taste. And I can validate it by the assimilability of the orange juice as well. I can say this. In my investigations, and I put on my gumshoe suit, one of the first things I said about the find is who's making what out of it. When I discovered, as far as I can tell, no one is. That means something. It doesn't prove anything. The second test I applied to this, can you make it work in everyday life? Is it practical? Well, there's a lot of it that's way beyond that. Metaphysical, eschatological, and so forth. But at least those things which I can't apply to everyday living, to me are reasonable. I take them in with no intellectual nausea. You know, I don't have to do a lot of double talk. In the Song of Solomon, I don't have to etherealize it. And this is a song of a love-sick guy. For a gal.
Or a passionate love.
Sure, and I don't have to say this is man's love for the church.
And well done, too, by the way.
Awfully well done, yes. And my salad baby used to feel that way in springtime, too. And
so long ago, I don't remember.
Only since the man does protest too much. But where I can apply, it works. The most interesting test I've made of this is in part 4. We were discussing this last night. I've taken the harmony of the gospel, and part 4 is substantial. There's this much of it. There's the life and teachings of Jesus in detail. And of course, his childhood I can't check on. Oh, it's a very intriguing story, highly believable. I enjoy it. I chuckle over parts of it. For example, the fact that he was the most inquisitive youngster in the synagogue school in Nazareth. The fact that he wasn't too well thought of by some of the parents of the duller pupils. That's human nature, you know. His head-on clash with his father when he observed the stadium of Psychopolis, the Greek city. The only time Joseph ever bawled him out. Jesus didn't understand the antipathy between Hellenistic culture and Hebraic culture.
May I get that second point you just made?
Yeah.
I probably should take the time to do it, but my little 7-year-old, he just 7 last week, Jan, in the first grade, a little girl came into her class. She was very pious. Her father was a missionary in the Pentecostal Holiness Church.
This is pretty far gone.
She said to Jan, what did your daddy do? Jan said, well, my daddy was a minister in the Church in Oklahoma City for 17 years. And he also was a guest lecturer for General Motors. Whereupon this little girl very piously said, well, Jan said to her, what did your daddy do? And the girl very piously, she said, Lord, he could open it pretty well. He said, my daddy worked for Jesus. Whereupon Jan answered, well, my daddy works for Jesus too, but General Motors pays better.
The place in here where it mentions that, I think it is speaking of the core of destiny, and it says, the one to whom these papers.
Yes,
You know where that is?
let me finish with my roommate.
I think it might help.
I take a Herman bill, and I've done this many times, and check this text against it. And Jesus goes right on talking, and my Herman runs out, and then picks up again, and then goes on. And it sounds just the same, but in the Herman, you couldn't find the scene. And I would submit that this particular carpenter is a tough guy to counterfeit. That's the most convincing thing in terms of technical detail to me. I can't tell Jesus paralleling the Bible or Jesus not paralleling the Bible. I can't tell them apart.
There's been no basic concept that you have mentioned that I would toss out that is alien to my thinking, except that you mentioned the terms of Lucifer and adjuster, and
the adjuster is the spirit of God that indwells each human being. The true light that lighteth every man that cometh into the world. That's their technical name for that.
Lucifer is the same as the devil?
No. In spirit, yes. Factually, no. They're all a part of the same game. Did you follow? There were more of them than we realized.
I've never felt that it was quite necessary to identify evil in personalities, but you put it very naturally.
The book agrees with you and says it just happens to be a local fact in time and space. This is not generally true. It's unfortunate that it happens around here. In principle, you're exactly right. It is true that evil is not necessarily personified. This is the truth. Locally, in this particular end of creation, it happens, unfortunately, to be a fact. Your feeling is true. See, just to give you a picture of, to do a little quick geography, our world is situated in a grouping of similar evolutionary planets, which is called a system, an administrative meta-astronomical unit. And the blueprint calls for about 1,000 worlds in the system. Not quite, doesn't have to be quite precise, but that's
Which the Earth is one.
These worlds are numbered serially in accordance with the appearance of human life. They're not registered as inhabited worlds until people evolve. Our world is number 606 in this local system, which means there were 605 before us. At the time of the Lucifer rebellion, which is 200,000 of our years ago, there were 607 inhabited worlds. At the present time, there are 619, we're told. Lucifer was the chief executive of this local system. He's not an evolutionary being, he's created. If you think of him roughly as an archangel, that wouldn't be bad. Technically he's not, but it would be comparable. They speak of him as a Lananandek son. These beings are designed to perform these functions. Each local world has a planetary prince, also a Lananandek of the secondary order. As it says in the papers, when Jesus said, "Now is the prince of this world cast down," he was not speaking figuratively, he was speaking very literally.
When you refer to the papers, do you refer to the book of Uranus?
Yes, that's right. They call themselves papers. Lucifer decided to go it on his own. Lucifer seceded from the kingdom of God, if you please.
This is a biblical interpretation, too.
Yes, I know.
I mean,
yes.
they've always said this.
30, let me get this correct. How many planets joined in? 37. Right. Out of the 607 planets, 37 planetary princes joined in with Lucifer. Ours was one. The name of our planetary prince is Caligastia. Technically, he's the devil. You want to look at it that way. Satan was the number 2 executive under Lucifer in the administration of this. And there have been 3 rebellions.
How many bills?
10,000 systems.
That's right.
There have been 3 rebellions. This is rebellion number 3, almost 3. Christ himself was involved in 2 of the others, because his bestowal here on earth was his 7th bestowal. 6 times he bestowed himself after the likeness of other orders of universe creatures. And his 2nd bestowal was as a primary Lemenetic son, the successor of a rebellious system father.
Have you ever read that thing by Ibsen where he said, describes the crucifixion? He said, what if this is an event that took place 2,000 years ago, or what if he goes on from world to world, living and dying for the sins of his people? Have you ever read that?
Yeah, very good. Again, there's a lot of truth in it. A lot of truth. As the papers say, much of man's cosmic romancing may not be fact, but much of it may still be true. These papers make sort of differentiation between fact and truth.
But the papers do not claim utter authenticity.
No, I'll read you what they say about themselves. Where they discuss the limitations of revelation.
I'm asking too many questions.
No, you're very welcome. No, you're not. You're very welcome. Listen, you ask these questions and they're interested every once in a while.
We all learn from it.
Every time I'm trying to question.
We just turn to page 1007.
By the way, just before we do that, one of my key problems, 1007,
Yes, wonderful 07.
one of my key problems in religion, and the fact that I've gotten in a lot of trouble because of this, that any concept or idea, if followed to fruition, does not end up in something practical for life. I am inclined to say, so what? This is the reason I am so weak on a belief in theology per se. Theology per se, as many ministers make their number 1 primary goal, understanding of the Trinity or something like this, rather leaves me cold. Because I say, so what? What does it have to do with life here and now? How will it help people to grow? Most of the things that I've heard here can be applied to life.
You find both in this book, Phil. The book is written to appeal to a wide range of human minds. This book is theological enough to confound a Brahmin priest in thought. This book is so intensely practical that it will appeal to a hard-headed businessman in thought. There's a paper in here that deals with aesthetics. I mildly wondered why it was ever written. But up in Chicago, there was an old professor of music who used to read this before it was published. And he'd always ask for 2 papers. And the paper on aesthetics was always one. There's a paper in here on the physical aspects of the evolutionary universe. I've had people say, why did they ever publish that? There's an engineer I know. This was the paper that appealed to him the most in the book.
Phil, while you're talking about those papers and coming into definite color, why don't we explain to Reverend Alexander that these revelations were completed in 1935, isn't that correct? And the book was published. The book was not published until 4 years ago. These papers were on hand in Chicago at one location and were not taken out. You could go there and study them and read them. But it's only been 4 years that the book has been put together.
That's great.
Book.
Well, let's just quickly run down these in one little. The first great revelation, Bill, is the revelation made to the planetary prince when he came down here some 200,000 years ago. It's pretty well lost. The second one is what Adam did 37,000 years ago. in the days of Eden. The third is the teachings of Melchizedek of Salem, who was of another order of local universe sonship. After the planetary rebellion, this planet went into receivership, and 12 Melchizedek sons, seniors to the Lamandex, took over. And they knew good and well that Michael, that Christ was coming here. But they looked down and the earlier revelations were just plain dying out. And so they appealed to their superiors in universe government. What do we do? And the only answer they got back was, the planet is in your charge. And so one of these Melchizedeks volunteered to do something that's very rare. Happened only 6 other times in local universe history. He volunteered to personalize the flesh and blood creatures. And they can produce bodies by tissue. The only catch is they're non-reproducing bodies. But otherwise, they're mortal. They're long lives because they're so very skillful. They can set cells like a bird can set types. They invested this Melchizedek with such a body. And it is very touching. It's described he walked into a sheep herder's tent one day and said, "I'm Melchizedek, priest of El Elyon, the Most High God." And that night, for the first time, he ate material food. This is a Melchizedek who was without father, without mother, without beginning or ending of days. And the author of Hebrews has an access to an unexpurgated version of Genesis. When they rewrote the Old Testament in Babylon to build up Hebrew nationalism, they cut out everything about Melchizedek except when he went out to welcome Abraham home for the victory over Kedorlaomer.
Do you think there's anything significant to the fact that Hebrews, the book of Hebrews, is the only book that begins with the word God?
I don't know. I didn't realize that. The Melchizedek laid the foundation, and it says the Jews were not a chosen people, but Abraham was a chosen individual. Melchizedek lived here for 92 years. I went to wake him up one morning and he was gone. He fell. But he planted the seed of truth. His main concept was that God is a person, is a being you can trust. Until you can trust God, you can't love him. That was his great message. And it's persisted longest among the Kenites. And you should read the story of Yahweh, God of the Hebrews in here.
Are the papers of Urantia somewhat correlated to the Bible?
Yes and no. For example, they make the statement there never were 12 tribes in Israel, which is why you can't find the missing tribes. There was Judah and Ephraim and a couple of small ones. The papers, for example, they'll go through the Old Testament and give you the secular history of the Jewish people and tell you how the Old Testament came to be as we now have it. Fascinating. Utterly fascinating. As they point out, the great struggle was during the captivity between the forces of nationalism and Deutero Isaiah, who spoke for the internationalist concept of Yahweh, and the nationalists won, unfortunately.
The same thing took place later in a smaller way between Peter and Paul.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, in winning, they made it impossible for the Jewish people to accept Jesus, because he had to sit on David's throne. But as they say, they so admired Deutero Isaiah's writings that they didn't flip them from the canon. Neither is this Adventism. Well, going on, the fourth revelation, you flip the page. 3, 4, and 5. We're going over.
I can buy these 5 things because I have always believed in an increasing knowledge of the Father.
Yes.
Always, yes.
It's got to be
You
that.
can't understand the Bible without it.
That's right. I like the sophistication of this text when they say this is not a finished text. Bill, while we're at this, and if you folks don't mind, let's just stay with this for a little bit. Turn to page 16. Yes.
Yeah, page 3 actually in the forward. Page 16, Bill?
Yes. I will be interested in acknowledgement.
Let's say 1 to 16.
No, page 16. Wait a second. It's kind of funny, we usually work pretty hard when we're having fun here. Just the one line should be acknowledged should be 3 paragraphs.
You know, 9 hours, Bill can wear you down, David Alexander, but when we can get him off to discussing hither and thither, it's fun.
Bill, I'll tell you about theology. It is to the beauty of language. No, it is to religion what grammar is to language.
Yes.
Now, or what a skeleton is to a human being. Without the skeleton, we're a helpless blob. Because that's all you've got, you pretty dry bones.
Yeah, I buy it. Of course, I think too many preachers stick with it, period, and the result is drive home.
Okay. I like people skeletons on the inside. Oh, sure. I think, Halen is extremely congregational. And they quote this book without realizing it for a long time. I know this happens. Truth is truth, Joe. Truth is truth.
He was remarking the other day.
I made a remark. I made it.
What you ran to these sermons, you did Sunday before last.
I went to First Christian Church one day, and Bill Alexander.
I was thinking that in this book.
I was First Christian Church one day, and Bill Alexander spoke. Made the statement that he didn't believe that everybody was born equal. And he said some of you might disagree with my theology. I don't think every child is condemned before they're born. Well, now, of course, that was not his teaching. Sure, was my teaching, and I wondered where he had gotten that. I think well, now, 99% of the ministers teach you that you're born good.
Of course, I think that whole concept makes of God a devil.
Sure does. So it makes
No less. No less.
Because God never got it. Because God was never jealous of man. You might conceive that you might be jealous for man, but not of me. I love the humility of that last paragraph.
Yes. Well, of course, I can buy almost anything that has that humility.
Yes, yes. So let's see here.
I mean, this is why the Southern Baptists get it, where they're so positive. They have the final word about everything. And this,
the author of this paper, the first paper says, I've been commissioned to do this because I represent the highest source of authority available on the planet. As many times I have enjoyed the pleasure of a sojourn in the personal presence of the human. I portray his nature and attributes with unchallengeable authority. I know her if I speak. In another paper he says, concerning this area, we only know what we've been told. No, that makes sense. They're so frank. They lay it on the line when they've experienced, and when they are dependent on what God has told them, they say, now this is what we've been told. Or they say, we don't know about the future, but you might like to join us in speculation. This is nothing to do. But here are the facts that we observe. First of all, offenders are moving inward, mobilizing, all the tremendous vast resources of evolutionary experience made in partnership with God. And way out yonder, not looking in towards the Milky Way, but in the opposite direction, is a tremendous physical universe winding up. Uninhabited, unpeopled. Yeah, there are power control features out there. We know we can measure the mind circuits going out. No spirit physics. Plenty of physical gravity physics. And they said we couldn't be criticized if we assume that there is a connection between the physical mobilization on the one hand and the spiritual, experiential mobilization on the other. And we predict that you people are going out there. And this is why you're being trained in universe administration. Here.
This is jumping. Your answer believes, does it, in reincarnation?
No. Your answer believes in what they're trying to get at in reincarnation, completion of unfinished business, or what the Catholics had in purgatory, clean out the fire and brimstone, but progressive growth. But it's a straight line between here and God, stopping at the many mansions in our Father's house. There's more than one heaven.
Well, I pretend that we really are reincarnated on the first magic world.
Yes, but reincarnation assumes you come back here.
That's what we all of us coming back here. No, male, not boy. Well, I can't help but have the feeling that I'm disrupting your lesson.
Yeah, listen to this, Bill. There's a definite divine purpose in all this scheme of mortal progression. This elaborate universe training school for ascending creatures. It is the design of the Creator to afford the creatures of time a graduated opportunity to master the details of the operation and administration.
Creators.
Yes. There's more of them. Yes. God has many sons. It is the design of the Creator to, when you see the magnitude of the universe, you realize what it says. This universe contemplates, Bill, the sometime appearance of 7 trillion worlds like this. There's about 5 trillion of them now.
I think you must clear that if you did just relationship
Well, let's go on for just a second. It is the design of the Creator to afford the creatures of time a graduated opportunity to master the details of the operation and administration of the grand universe. And this long course of training is best carried forward by having the surviving mortal climb up gradually and by actual participation in every step of the ascent. The mortal survival plan has a practical and serviceable objective. You are not the recipients of all this divine labor and painstaking training, only that you may survive just to enjoy endless bliss and eternal ease. There is a goal of transcendent service concealed beyond the horizon of the present universe age. If the gods designed merely to take you on one long and eternal joy excursion, they certainly would not so largely turn the whole universe into one vast and intricate and practical training school, requisition a substantial part of the celestial creation as your teachers and instructors, and then spend ages upon ages piloting you one by one through this gigantic universe school of experiential training. The furtherance of the scheme of mortal progression seems to be one of the chief businesses of the present organized universe, and the majority of innumerable orders of created intelligences are either directly or indirectly engaged in advancing some phase of this progressive perfection plan. In traversing the ascending scale of living existence, from mortal man to the deity embrace, you actually live the very life of every possible phase and stage of perfected creature existence within the limits of the present universe age. From mortal man to the presence of God, embraces all that can be, now can be, encompasses everything presently possible to the living orders of intelligent, perfected, finite creature beings. If the future destiny of the paradise finaliters, those who attain God, is service in new universes now in the making, it is assured that in this new and future creation, there will be no created orders of experiential beings whose lives will be wholly different from those which mortals have lived on some world as a part of their ascending training, as one of the stages of their age-long progress from animal to angel, and from angel to spirit, and from spirit to God. The spirit of this thing, Bill, is in the introduction of the first paper. From the universal Father who inhabits eternity, there has gone forth the supreme mandate: be you perfect even as I am perfect. In love and mercy, the messengers of paradise have carried this divine exhortation down through the ages and out through the universes, even to such lowly animal origin creatures as the human race is in your nation. This magnificent and universal injunction to strive for the attainment of the perfection of divinity is the first duty and should be the highest ambition of all the struggling creature creation of the God of perfection. This possibility of the attainment of divine perfection is the final and certain destiny of all man's eternal spiritual progress. Then they go on and say, you're not going to be perfect as God is, but as a creature, within your limitations.
I have said this for years, not in as pretty a language, or as deeply, but the whole idea of progression.
Isn't that wonderful?
And I've often said that you have to put your finger on the one job of a human being. It is to grow into what God intended him to be when he thought of him first.
There's a sentence there, Bill, that intrigues me. Havona is a good term. It's the universe which God personally made. It's not evolutionary. It's the universe we long for in spirit.
Heaven?
It's the eternal universe, not the time-space universe. It's at the center of all things. And it is a creation of flawless perfection. This is the universe which God's creator sons are trying to duplicate out here in time and space by the evolutionary method. As they say, the ability to comprehend is a mortal passport to paradise. Until you can understand, you cannot meet God.
God makes me aware.
Yes. Willingness to believe is the key to Havona. The acceptance of sonship is the price of evolutionary survival.
What is that? Where is that?
Page 290. And Bill,
What paragraph?
last paragraph.
Somebody else on it, right?
Here is what we're like when we hit Havana. As they say, when we for the first time find out what it is really going to work. We graduated from time and space. Long before reaching Havana, the ascendant children of time have learned to feast upon uncertainty, to fatten upon disappointment, to enthuse over apparent defeat, to invigorate in the presence of difficulty, to exhibit indomitable courage in the face of immensity, and to exercise unconquerable faith when confronted with the challenge of the inexplicable. Long since the battle cry of these pilgrims became, in liaison with God, nothing, absolutely nothing is impossible. Next page, 291. Paragraph 1, 2, 3, 3. 291.
We've all experienced those things too, haven't we?
Yes, exactly. As the papers present this, Bill, to give a rough thumbnail into their cosmology, they tell us that God is personally resident at the center of all things. And there's a place there, called paradise. It's the only thing outside of time and space. The only motionless reality in the whole cosmos. They said if you had the means to command the transport, you could go there. It takes a long time going away from the physical. But it wouldn't do you any good because your sensory mechanism wouldn't work if you got there. And you wouldn't know you were there. We got to do it early. Before we have the perceptiveness which will enable us to achieve a minimal recognition of the personality of the Father. And they aren't going to expose us until at least they think we've got an awfully good sporting chance of winning. Because not everybody makes it the first time. They always make it the second time. And it says the apparent failures of time are never confused with significant delays of eternity.
That goes back to what this historian said, what he had learned from all of history. Who was it? And one of them is that the hills of the gods grind slowly, but they grind exceedingly small. The four of them are tremendous and follow that exactly.
Yeah. Well, surrounding paradise is what they speak of as the central universe of eternity. This universe has no beginning in time. It's an eternal creation. There are 1 billion spheres in this universe. They're inhabited. This is the pattern universe. Out here in time and space, there are 700,000 duplications of this pattern universe being attempted by the creator sons of God. There are 700,000 of these creator sons. Each of these local universes will someday contain 10 million inhabited worlds.
May you sometimes be, according to this, a creator?
You may not. These beings are of direct origin in the Father and the Son.
You do believe that in one way we are all sons of God?
Oh yes, but we're creature sons, not creator sons. These beings are creators. They embody the divinity of the Father and the divinity of the Son in time and space. They are the union, they are produced by the union of 2 identical concepts appearing in the first and second persons of being. As they say, Christ is a creator son. Technically, he is not a member of the Paradise Trinity, but spiritually, they said, don't differentiate from the eternal Son. Spiritually and divinely, he is all that the eternal Son would have been had the eternal Son come to this world.
Is Melchizedek?
Melchizedek is one of the children. No, he is a creature son. He is one of the sons of this creator son, as is Lucifer. The creator of Melchizedek is Michael, Christ Michael, not the universal Father. Michael is of the paradise order of sonship. Melchizedek of the local universe order of sonship. Melchizedek was born in time and space. He has an origin. The adventure of these creator sons coming out here by the evolutionary technique, which means working in time, attempting to duplicate what their father did in eternity, is one of the great stories in this book. As they say, they're undoubtedly destined to go on out into outer space. As they depict this,
getting down to where we are now,
right,
with this concept, the H-bomb doesn't make very much difference.
It doesn't, from the standpoint of the human race, no. It might be the end of America, yes.
Or of the earth.
No, not of the earth. I'll gamble it. They tell us, I'm instructed for this book, there are only 2 things of supreme value in the inhabited world: the individual human being and the human race. All other values are relative. The human race will not come to an end on this one. Civilization, they don't regard that as supreme value. The United States of America is not a supreme value, it's a means of it. You and I, they don't particularly care, Bill, whether we live out our days or check in tomorrow. Continuation. This is from an eternal standpoint not too important how long we live, because we go on.
In other words, as a whole, we're important as individuals, we're not.
One of the great mistakes.
What was your explanation when I said this about the H-bomb? You said something.
Definitely it doesn't matter. We'll go on.
As the paper says, so God's knowing kingdom believer, what does it matter if all things are earthly trash? It's true. Your relationship to God.
Do you think this is what Jesus meant when he said, I have overcome the world?
Yeah. I think the greatest illustration of this is the puzzlement which plagued the followers of John the Baptist when they observed that Jesus did nothing to help John. And Jesus was not callous. He simply saw John's death in perspective. He knew where John was going and what awaited John. And whether John lived a few days, a few weeks, or a few months, or a few years, is quite immaterial. What
John had fulfilled his
John had fulfilled his
what he just took it for.
He had done that all.
What do you do with in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God?
That's the eternal Son, the second person of the
I thought that was
Yes. And in spirit, any creator son is the same as the eternal Son. For example, there's another order of paradise sonship. You see, though there's an awful lot of inhabited world, and each world is sooner or later visited by a paradise son who is born, lives, and dies, as Jesus did here. And the purpose of that is to release the Spirit of the Son, the Comforter, the Spirit of truth, which makes human minds universally indwellable by God's Spirit. This is the spiritually stepped in. Most of these sons who do this are not creators. They are magisterial sons. They are not of origin in the first and second person of deity. They are of origin in the second and the third person of deity.
Does your answer teach that we have only had one in this world?
One paradise son, yes. Christ. Christ being here. This happens only once in each local universe.
What would they do with Buddha?
He's a great teacher, as Moses is. They equate him to Moses, but not to Christ.
Or as Abraham?
They compare Abraham to Laodice or Confucius. They're very even-handed in their teaching, in their analysis of human spiritual leaders. They give them all credit, from an animal to Drew man who founded the sixth religion. These are all wise men, God-knowing men.
Well, what would they do about a contemporary like Schweitzer?
They don't mention it.
No, but
I don't know. I don't know if you're interested.
I mean, I think he's the greatest living man in the world
He's
today.
a very great man.
Could he be a creature son?
No.
Why not?
Well, these are superhuman beings, Phil. These are not more than that.
The creature sons are superhuman too?
They're paradise sons. They're of origin.
I'm not saying creator.
They're not creators, but they're superhuman beings of origin in God. They just don't create. These are the folks that come and bestow themselves on these other worlds. Creator son does this only once in the local universe.
Well, then why couldn't a Schweitzer or a Gandhi be a creature son?
Because he never says he was seen me as seen God.
Oh, I'm not saying creator.
We're in trouble on semantics. What I'm saying is a paradise son who's not a creator. We're not paradise sons, we're human sons. These are origin of paradise.
And you don't think it's possible that maybe a man who attains and grows to the place where Albert Schweitzer does? Have you ever heard him?
Yes.
I went to Aspen, Colorado.
Yes, I've read it.
Garrity Centennial. He was speaking through an interpreter, and I tell you, never before in my experience, nor never again, do I expect to hear a man, and every single person reacted this way. They felt they were listening to God speak. It was the most awe-inspiring thing I ever heard, and he was doing it by interpreter usually.
Comparing the Isaiah. These are wise men, Bill. These are wise men. But if a paradise son, when a paradise son, not a creator, is born and performs the mission of a bestowal son, as he begins the revelation of God to his human contemporaries, he says, he who has seen me has seen the eternal Son of paradise. That's the only difference.
Your gradation goes from the Father to the Creator Son, to the creature Son, to the paradise Son, to the creature Son.
No. We might as well clean this up now. We're in theology now.
Yeah.
My gradation goes, the universal Father, the eternal Son, and the infinite Spirit, the members in Trinity, beings of absolute status who also can function as finite, in a finite They have many beings who are of origin on paradise, of origin in deity. Some are creators, some are not. They're administrators. The sons I've been describing to you are magistrates. And this is how they earn their right to sit in judgment on human survival. They live the life of human beings and demonstrate their rights. You can have, such as who?
That's what I'm asking you.
We never had one here.
Oh.
We got a creator's son instead of a magisterial son.
I see.
Disruptive and destructive in the pre-settled eras of that very realm. You can give liberty to a 30-year-old that could hardly be anything but abused by a 13-year-old. And when a 13-year-old wants the liberties of a 30-year-old, if you give it to him, you're sowing the seeds of destruction in that child's life.
Well, then, do you think that science properly right.
I think this is correct, yes. It's purely a matter of cultural level. It's nothing to do with the insult.
No, there would be nothing special.
Yes, I do. No, I get something right here.
Bill, what do you think the wrong thing that families are advocating clinical matter, the statements and whether by criticism of youth rather than advice and counsel?
Sure. Let me give you a good example. A good idealistic experiment was the Prohibition Amendment. I'm told by my parents that this country was slowly drying up. The idealists clamped the amendment on the American populace. In my first year in prep school, no one drank. In my last year, no one who amounted to anything didn't. The net result has been that for the first time, criminals became possessed of millions of dollars. It didn't work, did it? All right. You have the same problem when you try to go too fast in any direction. You cannot move too far in advance of human attitude. The problem with Negro immigration is cultural in large measure.
Well, I was only whether it's business, whether it's related to what.
It's not uncomplicated by race. So here, I'm talking to a pal of mine. We're up in the Commodore Perry in Toledo, discussing this over a good dry martini. And I said, Floyd, let's say we had a choice of having dinner tonight between a Negro college graduate or a certified blue-eyed blonde Aryan who is a pubbler in one of the steel mills in Pittsburgh. Who would you pick? He said, the Negro, of course. And I said, why? He said, we got nothing to talk about with the other fellow.
Well, you think in the controlled enthusiasm and better leaders that it will balance itself properly.
Your problem is human emotion. There are enough educated Negroes who feel bitter that now they're going to do a little pushing. In this human nature. They're human beings, you know. And they're not going to be wise. Of course, they've learned it from others. What is it they say, N? AACT? NAACT. One of the fellows told me down south in South Carolina, he says, niggers ain't acting like colored people.
That's a good wow. I think Paul was proving some of that also.
We had a colored lady here in Oklahoma State, and I say colored lady because she was a southern educated Negro, it's in Denver. She did so much for the Negroes around Oklahoma State, and Daddy back then all, and she was quite a funeral when she died now. And she said herself that the Negroes were their own worst enemies. Because if they would get the education and just continue to act themselves, they would get so much further down in the decades.
And we've got those elements in our tribe too, you know. We have our poor white trash elements, woolhead elements. We've got some white folks in Chicago that you wouldn't particularly care to fellowship associate.
Well, what I was studying to is color.
Yeah. Fundamentally, color complicates. But the fact that they were enslaved complicates. Incidentally, it puts us morally in the wrong for their being here. And the white man will have to pay for that someday. We are morally in the wrong, which makes us edgy and touchy. I don't mean that any of our immediate ancestors did this, but we belong to the same tribe who did this.
So don't you think that's been true since the start of time?
Sure.
All open the case.
What's that about? Yeah.
There are species of something that happen, or it's just like our evolutionary progress.
Sure.
Or nothing that step.
I'll give you a good example. I'm talking to a division manager in a flat steel plant in Patterson, New Jersey, and they're working heavy overtime. The boys out in that plant did not get the money they're getting because they put in the processes which are earning that money. They got that money because they're part of the CIO. And do you know something? The thing that's keeping that plant going are bookies. Betting on horse races is siphoning off enough of this excess earnings so that these people are staying hard at work to cover their racing losses. As Mappel says, if it wasn't for the bookies, it would be gin and we'd be shut down. Thank God for gambling.
Maybe we better legalize.
So that's your material.
It's an interesting quirk. Well, some of those boys out there never got beyond 6th grade and they're making $1,000 a month. They don't know what to do with it. They just don't know what to do with it.
What?
In New Jersey.
Oh, it's fine. Sure, that's a 5-day week. And of course,
Let's read these last two paragraphs. I think they're tremendous. We're still on 1302. As man shakes off the shackles of fear, as he bridges continents and oceans with his machines, generations and centuries with his records, he must substitute for each transcendent restraint a new and voluntary assumed restraint in accordance with the moral dictates of expanding human wisdom. These self-imposed restraints are at once the most powerful and the most tenuous of all the factors of human civilization, concepts of justice and ideals of brotherhood. Listen, we have elections in this country. When you vote on the losing side, why don't you take to the hills in fear? They do in Latin America. I've been there, I've observed it. You realize that the thing that makes our republic work isn't in writing anywhere. You can't find it. It is more tenuous than cloud and stronger than steel. It's human trust. The worst that happens is you're a paving contractor. You may not get your county road contract, but your family isn't in jeopardy. We trust each other. We've earned that trust. You can't beat that into human heads. We take it as a matter of course. Fidel Castro is having a little fun after Batista in Cuba. And that's a good example that this is not something that everybody has just by birth. The American people have earned it. And Shillington, it's not in the Constitution, would make me do it. Cuba doesn't in the Constitution, so does Nicaragua. So does France. Many then qualifies himself for the restraining garments of mercy when he dares to love his fellow men, while he achieves the beginnings of spiritual brotherhood when he elects to mete out to them that treatment which he himself would be accorded, even that treatment which he conceives that God would accord. Isn't that an interesting introduction of Jesus' two levels of ethics? Love your neighbor as yourself, the lower level. If you will love men as I have loved you, the higher level. An automatic universe reaction is stable and in some form continuing in the cosmos. A personality who knows God and desires to do his will, who has spirit insight, is divinely stable and eternally existent. Man's great universe adventure consists in the transit of his mortal mind from the stability of mechanical statics to the divinity of spiritual dynamics. And he achieves this transformation by the force and constancy of his own personality decisions. In each of life's situations declares, it is my will that your will be done. Interesting, they put it positively here, don't they? It is my will that your will be done. I like that better than not my will but your will. I think it's the only time it's stated positively in the whole book.
You read last night, Brad Christ, he was controlled enthusiasm.
Yes.
I heard that many years ago and started to try to find what it was, but I understood more of it last night.
Yeah.
We were discussing it going home the first time I had heard it. You got a good job, though.
Right.
You're this man that used it.
Oh.
You got a good job.
This whole tailoring of this paper is a discussion of these universe mechanisms. Time and space as mechanisms controlling man. Let me ask you, why are we uneasy about atomic energy? Because we've broken down these restraints faster than we've imposed internal restraints, right? We feel a little bit naked and a little bit scared, right? It's as timely as it should be today. Tell a guest again.
Wasn't that really what was wrong? There's uncontrol.
Yes, no restraint, I think. No restraint. In other words, the idealist has illusions. If he's an idealist, he believes them. I think the best definition of ideal is, that I've run into, is a navigator uses the stars to steer by. If he doesn't, he's a poor navigator. But only a fool would try to steer into the stars from the sea. To me, ideals are inspiration. They're like the life of Jesus. I can't be Jesus. But one thing I don't want to be, I want to get married, have children. This is not a slavish copying of his life. His life is not designed to be a blueprint to me. His life is designed to be an inspiration to me. To copy his life in principle, not detail. He never said to his apostles, you boys must now all be carpenters, you must remain celibate, you must have so many brothers and sisters, you must leave your father when you're 13. No, he merely said that you would love men as I have loved you. That's all he wants. This is the inspiration. This is the emulation in principle. But how foolish to try to do it in detail. You know, if I came down here with sandals and a toga, this would be quiet, wouldn't it? That's copying in detail.
same copy of his wife and said she's not in. That's right. It's an inspiration, not a blueprint. You know, you're only getting around for a copy of it. Let's have a bit.
Get on the back of it, do that.
In Southern California, I could probably get it started in a hurry. Definitely. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's it.
This is a man who is associated with church on Sunday, and he is tied in, is trying to get tied in. There's quite a bit of money here through Frank Putnam, KK Lloyd, a couple others. And it's something that they, by electronics, have superseded gravity. Now, a very intelligent and solid PhD in my constitution said they did the same thing up in Maryland, for heaven's sake. Watch this for me. Now, Carr was there. The Carr is the inventor. In December of 1959, they say they have a stint to go to the moon. Now, he has a lot of material, and he's a very serious chap. He gave me a bunch of material, which, by the way, doesn't make 100% that this makes it. Yeah.
I saw those and they kind of took anyway, I didn't want to call them.
Have you ever heard of him?
There's a Gravity Institute in Philadelphia.
You put up a question on this thing of who gets something out of it.
Yeah.
Well, I find this free of that, but I do not find this other free of that as much as I did.
This arouses my normal human suspicions.
Yeah.
You talk about practicality, Bill. You have to get out of here pretty quick.
Yeah.
Can you send a couple of paragraphs?
Yeah.
All right.
I can leave in 10 minutes.
All right. They're discussing some of the fraternal contacts we have with angels. In the next place we go right after we leave here.
That's another world.
Another world, another place. These angels are all in the chain of recorders, extending from the lowest to the highest custodian to the facts of time and the truths of eternity. Someday, they will teach you to seek truth as well as fact, to expand your soul as well as your mind. Even now you should learn to water the garden of your heart, as well as to seek for the dry sands of knowledge. Forms are valueless when lessons are learned. No chick may be had without the shell, and no shell is of any worth after the chick is hatched. But sometimes error is so great that its rectification by revelation would be fatal to those slowly emerging truths which are essential to its experiential overthrow. When children have their ideals, do not dislodge them. And while you are learning to think as men, you should also be learning to pray as children. Law is life itself, and not the rules of its conduct. Evil is a transgression of law, not a violation of the rules of conduct pertaining to life, which is the law. Falsehood is not a matter of narration technique, but something premeditated as a perversion of truth. The creation of new pictures out of old facts, the restatement of parental life and the lives of offspring, these are the artistic triumphs of truth. The shadow of a hair's turning premeditated for an untrue purpose, the slightest twisting or perversion of that which is principle, these substitute falsehood. But the fetish of factualized truth, fossilized truth, the iron band of so-called unchanging truth, holds one blindly in a closed circle of cold fact. One can be technically right as to facts and everlastingly wrong in the truth.
Right.
And on the next page it says, the argumentative defense of any proposition is inversely proportional to the truth contained. Isn't that the first? And I've always remembered that the argumentative defense of any proposition is inversely proportional to the truth contained. Jesus never said, you shall know the facts, and the facts shall make you free.
Of course, I tell you, one of your biggest drawbacks, it seems to me, in this whole presentation, is the fact that with something as long as this does, you have to go up against people's first thinking. So many crackpot philosophies.
I know no way out of that. I know no way to escape that dilemma.
No, I don't either.
We have to live it now.
Well, of course, if it's truth, it will triumph.
Yeah.
But I have some men, for instance, who go for, what do they call it? Destiny.
Yes.
Have you heard this?
Vaguely.
You wouldn't want to go any farther. And by the way, they're pretty intelligent men.
They're hungry.
But it appeals to their prejudices. And, for instance, it specializes in hating the Jews. And I tell you, this stuff is just anathema to me. And very frankly, when Mr. and Mrs. Baker first mentioned it to me, I thought to myself that it's more of this destiny.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So I'll tell you our experience with this. I group will bear me out. In the beginning, the acceptance of this book depends a great deal on what you think of the person who tells you about it. Now, pretty soon the book stands on its own feet. But I'm very conscious that in the beginning, if somebody was sending, well, first this is form of the blood, look at it. But the average stuff, liberate the inner forces that slumber within you. I read that and it goes right in the wastebasket. I haven't got time. Now, if somebody gets Joe English done it to me and said, Bill, this I think is terrific, I'd read it. I'd at least give it a good fair chance. But if it just came cold, this gets filed these facts. I'm in a hurry. And I could miss truth that way too.
Well, seems to me that's one of your great problems, but I don't know anything that can be done about it.
It's got to be personal. It's got to be hand to hand, mouth to mouth.
Of course, another thing is that there are so few people who can express themselves as well as you can.
Thank you.
Who believe in your answer just as much as you do, but are unable to transmit that to a skeptical person.
We'll get more.
Oh, yes.
Listen, Bill, as I look at this, the fields are not white under the harvest, by any means. This is the time for the accumulation of seed corn. This thing, I think, is going to hit when I've been dead about 50 years. But that's all right. I just go back to what happened to Jesus people. It took it a while to catch hold of the Greco-Roman world. All right? I've benefited from that harvest, and I didn't sow, so I should be willing to sow here where I don't have a time and chance of reaching my opinion.
You write the book also tells us in there when skeptics get your back to the wall and say, how do you know all this? Simply say to them very kindly, I know because I know.
If you say, how do you know I don't know? Especially concerning God. Because if they take that hook, they've got to say, I believe you don't know. And they're now feeling the belief. Now, you've got to go over it. That's the only unanswerable argument about God, I think.
Well, the fact is this concern for all denominations and visions start with denominations. It's true.
Of course, I think maybe, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I think in a way I disagree with what I have heard, at least, in the way of application. If this is true, then should it not, by people like you who believe in it, be terminated within churches? Can't you do this better from within than from without?
Wouldn't it hurt both? Why not move in every direction?
I have found a little tendency, I think, on the part of most of the ranch people to want to come together within just this, within your own classes, which I think is good, but a tendency not to exterminate it from within the church.
I think there's,
Well, for instance, you told me about this, you don't go to church.
well, I never have.
I know.
This is my discipline and background.
All
I
right.
was raised by two very Christian MDs.
All right. My point is that couldn't a person of your intellect and heart and mind and spirit from within a church do a tremendous amount of seed corn?
Sure. But I move around all the time, Bill. It's my job. I'm a mobile unit.
No.
I'm in Chicago like that, almost 6 or 7 days a month.
But as long as you're in time and space, you're somewhere on something.
Sure.
And it just seems to me that in any city in which you may be, there is some church that could be helped to grow tremendously if this is true. If you from the inside,
Conceivably. I have no contact.
Bill,
My contact right now is that.
now I'm not doing this from a preaching standpoint.
I know.
If this is true, this is good.
Your input is good. Now, in our experience, I've been associated with this book for 3 years. We find that they have to be ready for this, or they won't accept it. Now, if a person is in church and they're satisfied in the position they're in their church, they're no good for us. Now, if the religion or what they get in church isn't satisfying their spiritual appetite, they want to go a little further, as I did, and start to search and become a little closer to God. This is the picture.
In other words, he's saying that a lot of them that are in the church are dormant right there.
Well, they're satisfied with the position.
Basic in my thinking along that line is that the church member who is satisfied is dead. So that's what
He's satisfied in the position he's in. He thinks he's a good Christian. He pays his bills. He goes and listens to the sermon. And he makes his contributions. They're active in the different committees, and they enjoy the fellowship, and that's their religion, and they don't care to go with it.
But isn't one of the main jobs of the church to stimulate within individuals a search for truth, for continual growth?
That's where we come
It
in.
should be one of the main jobs. Yes, where we
Well, I
come in.
think what Bill is trying to say is the church government is there to be used. And what difference does it make when the church is disseminated? Why not use it that church disseminated?
I'll tell you what's been done, Bill. A thing called the Rancher Brotherhood has been organized. It's a congregational sort of a thing. It's not a church. It's social. I define it as a social organization with a religious objective. It has no hierarchy. It has no ecclesiastical authority. I was once president of it. And I had plenty of administrative authority, period. I just thought it was Constitution part. I was president, not archbishop. You know?
Yeah.
And
With our churches, for instance, and the congregational churches built on the same system.
now, our purpose in organizing this, and I helped write that Constitution, was the sad review of history. If we don't provide a harmless organization, maybe a pernicious one will grow up. One of the cardinal articles in the Constitution is that membership in any church, religious, or fraternal association shall not be a bar to membership in this brotherhood. This brotherhood has no theological, ecclesiastical objective. these folks right now are learning this book. They're sophomores still.
No, right.
You're not freshmen, but you're not juniors or seniors yet. What I'm trying to do is to help promote the development of teachers of this book. I'm sure that all of you are not going to teach it, but I'm equally sure that some of you are. I'm trying to mobilize seed corn bill. Where the corn goes, I don't know, except there was a story about a sower who went forth to sow, and I suspect the results are going to vary due to circumstances beyond our control.
No.
I'm interested in training teachers. What happens after that? Frankly, I don't expect to be around to see. I won't be here. I'll love these sports.
But you have to have a pretty good knowledge of this book in order to answer people's questions. But they answer
You wait to get out there and ask Bill Evans, because I knew he knew, and I knew I might.
So I read this thing, I don't know, somewhere in 13, 15 times. I've had to exit all the way over. And what's more, my mind works along these channels. I suspect I got aptitude for it, you know?
Yes. Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about that.
And all I know to do is do what I can do. So that's why I'm here. I'll get out to California, I'll get into Chicago, I'll get out to Connecticut. I'm trying, it just happens that my business takes me all over. And so I take advantage of that.
I still say, because I have not read it,
If this is true, then is this not possible? And has this occurred to any of you? You know and I know that the church is not getting the job done today. Right. Is it not possible, if this is true, that this could be the terminating influence within the church that would make it get the job done as it was intended to?
Bill, before you go to the late comers, Bill Gristle, Bill Alexander.
Hi, Bill. He's married.
Reverend Bill, if you're still interested in, and I know you are about it a great deal,
Yes.
about the eternal Son and the creative Son, if you look up pages 6 and 21, you'll get this story.
Papers 6 and 21.
6 is the eternal Son, and paper 21 is the creative Son. Little patty there. I think when I found out he's really wise, and he's more teaching.
Hello, Will. Thank you very much. They don't subtract from me. They have to. I believe this. I believe this. Meeting you, sir. Real good. Thank you a lot. Hopefully you get back on the cream.
You're not leaving, I hope.
We probably will. I suspect. I'm home now. I'm going.
Okay.
Very nice to see you.
You'll be back to see me, David Journal?
I told your wife that I knew you, Don, but I didn't know that you had arrived. Good to see you. Well, oh, yeah.
So we do anything like that.
We girls said I heard you get to work, so I missed the coffee break. It's very interesting. Just a good guy. The universe, like the start of civilization, could well be captioned like Churchill's last volume, the narrative of the war, triumph and tragedy. It's a mixture. God's will prevails in the overall, but not always in detail. And this provides the tragic note which keeps this from being just a simple, plain, bland success story. You know, a Pollyanna deal, where everything is smooth and there are no problems. And the Lucifer Rebellion is one of the tragic sub-motifs which add piquancy and flavor to the whole story of evolutionary triumph. You will observe in this paper that no one can explain why Lucifer rebelled. They're theorizing, but they do not know where these ideas came from. The Union of Days, the faithful of Days on redemption had no illusion. For over 100 years before the outbreak of the rebellion, he'd been sending an intelligence report that all was not well. They knew trouble was brewing. But trouble can brew and it doesn't always have to break out. You'll recall that one of the qualifications of a mighty messenger is that he be rebellion tested. Does this mean that a rebellion always has to break out? The answer is no. It counts for even more if you can prevent a rebellion, if you can talk somebody out of it. I think the story of Lucifer presents a beautiful illustration of the difference between evil and sin. We're on page 601. When Lucifer started out, Lucifer had done a job of rationalizing, or what we sometimes refer to as an internal snow job. He had sold himself a bill of goods that what he was going to do was for the good of the system, if not for the good of the universe. He felt his system had been put upon. Lucifer wanted to set up an autonomous system. He wanted to have concentrated authority in the system. Now, these objectives are not evil. If you'll look ahead just a few pages, to page 632. When an entire local system is settled in light and light, it becomes virtually self-governing. First paragraph after the text. Such a system of inhabited world becomes virtually self-governing. The system legislative assembly is constituted on the headquarters world. Courts are now established. These are the things which Lucifer wanted in his day as today. He has executive authority, but no power of legislation, no judicial authority. Legislative authority is on the Constellation, judicial authority is the universe headquarters. You can't say that his objective is bad, can you? Because this is exactly what was ahead of him, or ahead of this system had he been patient. Again, in the third, the constellation stage, over on the next page, first paragraph after caption 9. During this next stage, many constellation and universe activities are transferred to the system capital. As nearly as I can deduce, Lucifer was trying to see that which he would have gotten in due course anyway. Now, let's say that I want to be a philanthropist, and I want to give away considerable sums of money. I don't have the money, but I want to do good. So what do? I knock somebody over the head and take the money away from them, and then I'm a philanthropist. Is this philanthropy? No. First I should earn the money, shouldn't I? And if I have the ability to earn the money, then perhaps I have the judgment to give it away wisely. This is an exact parallel. Lucifer wanted to short circuit things. I can see nothing wrong with his objective and what he wanted to do with the system government, because 2 papers later I read that these are going to happen. Caligastia, here on Earth, proclaimed himself planetary sovereign. When our world is settled in light and light, whoever is the planetary prince will be proclaimed planetary sovereign. The boss. Why did Lucifer rebel? I don't know. Why did Judas fail to love Jesus? I don't know. But that's the one respect in which Judas differed from his 11 associates. In every other respect, there were parallels, overlaps, similarities. The obvious critics didn't understand him most of the time. But they loved him.
Well, he never wrote papers on it. He seemed to think that the day he set out to the type of scientist that he had gone through.
Yeah. How about Lucifer's title?
No, we don't know that.
Lucifer was raised just like all the little Amalecites were raised. Does the rebellion mean that the Amalecites always follow? Well, Satan followed Lucifer. But in what is was probably the second rebellion,
Lanaford was the assistant system officer. Yet he kept the same job in that system as Satan held in this system. And when his chief rebelled, he told him to go roll a hook. He remained absolutely loyal to the universe authority. The present Lutheran successor is a rebellion Texas nowadays. It's individual free will. As the papers point out here, we've been discussing the planetary rebellion. President Calgary joined in with Lucifer. Amadas, who from a cosmic standpoint, in terms of education, didn't know his next on Thursday, was loyal as the bishop. We get the answer. He couldn't be too smart. How about Grant? He was smart and he was loyal too. You cannot write a formula. It's the alchemy of choice. And you're right up against what they say about personality, one of the unsolved mysteries of the universe of universe. I think in situations, many times, you don't make a decision. You find that you have made one. This I have found. I have looked at the situation and have discovered that a decision is in existence. I just didn't know it was there before. And this these I'm pretty sure of. These I tend to follow. If people agree with me, they call it courage. If they disagree with me, they call it stubbornness. All depends on who's out. Lucifer was critical. Does that mean that if you're a critic, you're foredoomed? I don't think so. Criticism is a symptom. It can be constructive as well as negatively constructive. He was an individualist, so Galaghetti. But then Nathaniel was an individualist too. He wasn't a conformist. Thomas was hard to get along with. Remember when he joined up his wife, heaved a sigh of relief for the thank the Lord to be away from home all the time. That was her reaction to Thomas commissioning as an apostle. Can you imagine anything more mercurial or inconstant than Simon Peter? No. And of course, Peter went through a very scarifying experience, having that almost forcibly removed from him, like you pull a bad tooth. Andrew lacked enthusiasm. You can analyze up and down. There's just one thing wrong, and that is it what? Lucifer accepted Michael as his father, but not as his sovereign. I would like to have the chance to ask Lucifer, just where the hell did you think Michael came from? Was he spontaneously generated by impersonal forces on paradise? I mean, to me, that's the most vulnerable point.